Oh, goody.
All right, what is going on, everybody? Zombies here again, and today we are back with another Mercenaries video. This one is going to be covering my experience with maxing out all the current characters in Mercenaries. So if you haven't seen already on either my Twitter or Twitch, definitely go check those out, but I have recently completed a full 100% max Mercenaries collection. And this was no small feat. This was difficult. This took a long time. I'm someone who has been playing since pretty much launch of the mode, and this is actually the first time I have had a full 100% maxed collection. I know there were some others who were able to max out their collections before the first new wave of mercenaries dropped with the pirates and whatnot. However, I was not in that boat, and so this is my first time ever really hitting that 100% mark. As we can see here, I have the HS Replay collection manager up. I definitely recommend giving this a look if you want a easy way to manage your collection, and it is totally free, so you don't need any kind of subscription or anything like that, like some of the other Mercenaries features they have. You just need to download Hearthstone Deck Tracker, and it will automatically sync up your collection, and you can see these nice progression wheels here, and I'm going to scroll down and go through. I really like their kind of overlay for everything. I think it's very nice, and I'm more of a visual person, so to me, this is how I prefer viewing my collection rather than kind of scrolling through the pages in the client itself, especially for viewing portraits. Like here you can see I have all the Alex Straza portraits. It just makes it a lot easier, and viewing your excess coins. And you can actually sort by, different rarity, different role. You can sort by, who has the most coins. Here you can see I have Rokara with the most coins. So I'll scroll through this and kind of show you where I am at with my collection, while talking about kind of my experience with the mode and my thoughts of it as of the current patch, which is 22.4. There is, a new patch around the corner, most likely. We actually had Tuesday's announcement delayed until Thursday this week, and it would not surprise me if we got a new patch that same day, potentially with new mercs. So definitely keep an eye out for that very soon. But yeah, we're going to get right on into it. So, first question that I'm sure a lot of people have is, well, how long did it take you to do this? And that is a very difficult question to fully quantify, though I can say basically the only easy answer I can give is way too long. This experience took a very, very long time, and it was just a ton of grinding. I did like insane amounts of grinding over time. And generally, I've been playing pretty consistently since launch. I don't think I've really taken much time off since then. And launch was about 5, almost 6 months ago. I think we're actually exactly at the 5-month mark as of today. So it took a while. It was not an easy grind in terms of the amount of time it took. And one thing worth noting is that spending money does really not help with the grind. Once you have a decently completed collection, it really, you notice some diminishing returns and whatnot, but I'll talk about that shortly when I cover extra coins a bit more. So the first thing I'm going to talk about here is the PvE experience. So I know there are a lot of opinions about that and whatnot, so I'm just going to share some of my own. Talked about this a bit on the podcast before too, but basically the thing with PvE right now in its current form is that it feels very unfulfilling and monotonous for me. Basically, I don't really mind grindy games. I've actually have actually hundreds of hours in some grindy games, most notably like old school RuneScape, among others, and I am definitely in that target demographic of I do not mind a game that really makes me grind if the payoff feels satisfactory. And that's kind of the thing that Mercenaries is lacking right now, in my opinion. is that the grind is just really not satisfying to me. It just feels like I'm doing all this work to get these characters maxed out just so I can play the mode that I want to play, rather than maxing them out to, do some kind of end game PvE content or some challenging PvE content, because currently there's just no reward for doing so, really. Like the coin rewards are so random and bad a lot of the time, especially relative to the time commitment that some of these harder and longer bounties take, that it's just really not worth it most of the time unless you're purely playing for that PvE experience. And, I've talked with players who do primarily play this game for the PvE, and there seems to be, two main groups. You have the people who are PvP focused, and they have to do PvE because it is required to basically get your characters leveled up and get coins and all that stuff. And then the PvE players, what I've heard for the most part from most people that I've talked to, has been they really enjoy the collection aspect of it. And this is something that was kind of funny to me, because in the recent Ben Lee interview, he kind of came out and said, well, we never really expected people to collect them all and like max them all. And that really strikes me as strange. I don't know how they could not have expected that. I mean, have they not seen what, players of Blizzard games usually do? They commit very hard to these games, whether it's Hearthstone, World of Warcraft, Diablo, the list goes on. But if there's one thing that has been consistent about, Blizzard games throughout the years, is that a lot of the times they have these very dedicated player bases who, put a ton of time into these games. So the idea that it wasn't on their radar that people were going to want to collect everything and all that, I just find that really hard to believe. Because predominantly what I'm hearing from people who do the PvE is that is a big driver for them, completing that collection. I know multiple people who have made their own spreadsheets for it. I personally really enjoy what we have here in the tracker on HS Replay, but I know multiple people who have basically done their own kind of spreadsheets and all that kind of stuff, so they can track, hey, here's how many more coins I need, here's how close I am to the full max collection, that kind of stuff. And the satisfying gameplay for them is just getting closer to that 100%. So that seems to drive a lot of PvE players, at least the ones I have talked with. And it seems strange to me that they didn't really consider that as like a prime demographic for this type of game. I really don't understand that. I just think the PvE needs to be drastically improved. They made the mistake of dropping the Slay the Spire name as a comparison early on. I think that really did a lot of negativity for the mode, because it set expectations way, way too high, because Slay the Spire is an amazing roguelike game that has essentially infinite replayability. So people were thinking with Mercenaries, oh, this is going to be this awesome solo roguelike-esque content that I can play, however many times. Like a lot of people have kind of that experience with Dungeon Run, where they'll complete a huge number of times because it's kind of fun and different every time. And though there are some elements of that in Mercenaries with like the treasures each run and that kind of thing, it just really feels like there's no incentive to actually do that stuff once you get a full max collection. And even before you get a full max collection, it feels like the game does not incentivize you to do more challenging and interesting content. If anything, if your primary focus is, grinding them all out as fast as possible or just playing PvP, the best thing to do is the opposite, is to often do that 1-1 grinding and farm up your tasks, get all 18 tasks done, then go sit in 1-1 for however many hours and get your characters ready. And it's just really surprising to me. It's actually kind of funny that they decided to nerf the air elemental in the beginning because people were grinding too fast. And their reasoning for that was like, oh, we don't want to, make people feel like they're forced to do the early game content. But that excuse does not hold up to me, because literally what people are doing right now, if they want to grind efficiently, is doing the 1-1 farming on heroic. And I did a whole video covering, why people do that and why it's effective to do that. But, if they actually wanted people to do, later and more interesting and challenging content, they haven't really given us a reason yet. The closest thing to that is they kind of forced it. So instead of the third item for new mercenaries being locked behind task 7, like it was on launch, now it's locked behind completing a heroic bounty with that character. And while I personally thought that was a decent step in the right direction, it really doesn't change the fundamental problem. It's just making it so people run through heroics once and then they never touch them again. And I just don't understand how they couldn't think like, hey, we should have like an endless mode, or hey, we should have something to give PvE some kind of replayability and end game that just currently doesn't exist in its current form. They did mention a while back that the next big focus for them is going to be PvE endgame, but we still haven't heard a word about that. And so can't really comment too much on that, but there are a lot of great ideas that the community has had, and it just feels like the progress on this is going very, very slow. And I want to like the PvE. Like, I want to actually enjoy the crazy amount of hours I have to put in to get my characters up for PvP. And in the current state, I just don't feel positive about it. Like it's a nuisance, and it feels like I'm being forced into PvE to play what I want to play of the mode, which is just a bad experience. So those are kind of my thoughts on PvE. Also, give players some kind of way to work towards a long-term goal in PvE that's not maxing your collection. There's some great suggestions like, a portrait or something kind of like the gold hero powers in Constructed, where you can have like a gold border around your mercenaries and stuff, like, or their skill abilities or whatever, or a fancy animation entry. Like, there are a lot of different things they could do, but giving players some kind of a long-term goal to achieve, I think, would also go a long way in helping the PvE experience be a lot more enjoyable and fun for players. And the biggest thing is make the rewards feel worthwhile. If I'm spending 10 to 15 minutes clearing a bounty and I finish it and I get coins that I don't need and can't use because I have all the coins for that character, it makes me want to close the game. And that is a pretty common sentiment from a lot of the other players I have talked to. So speaking of excess coins, we're going to talk about that now. So as you can see on the list here, I have a lot of excess coins. A pretty insane amount, actually. I did the work of totaling it all up so you don't have to. So the exact number of excess coins I have as of this recording is 273,445 coins. That's a lot. That is over 250,000 coins. And honestly, I really thought, 5-6 months into launch, we would really have a fix for this. And we've still heard basically nothing about it. The only mention of this relatively recently was in Ixar's AMA. They just started doing again. And someone asked, hey, do you have anything to talk about with the excess coin problem in Mercenaries? And the response was, let's just say, unsatisfactory, to say the least. Basically, he mentions that he has started getting involved in Mercenaries a bit more himself recently, and that the excess coin issue is one that, quote unquote, pains the Mercs lead more than any other. However, they are in talks about what to do about the issue and have nothing else to say at this time. That is insane to me. That is actually crazy that it has been almost half a year and we're literally getting the same candid response that we got shortly after launch. There'll be a use for them eventually, sure. I kind of expected them to actually do something with it in half a year's time. I don't think that's unreasonable. And frankly, the fact that they're still in the talking phase about how to solve this issue is honestly kind of a joke and unacceptable to me. Like, that's just clearly this is the biggest issue impacting the most amount of players in the game. And the fact that they don't even have something like in testing at this point after this much time is crazy. I really don't know what else to say about it. And, it may pain the Mercs lead, and I don't doubt that is true because, Paul seemed like a cool guy who had a passion for the mode, but I'm sure he understands at this point anything he says about the game is going to get drowned out by the excess coin issue because it is affecting and annoying so many players. But you know what it is not paying? It's not paying their profit margins. They're actively making money off of the fact that you're getting garbage from packs. And in some cases, it is a lot of money. So I'm not saying, the people developing the game are the ones responsible for these decisions, but it doesn't change the fact that it's unacceptable. And it really needs to change because it feels like it is being so unnecessarily slow-rolled. And this is going to be an issue that just impacts more and more people the longer they take to fix it. And whatever solution they do come up with, they better hope it's the right one. Because if they screw this up, you are going to lose so many of your dedicated, invested players because we're already at a point where the mode is just... It feels like it wants you to go back to 2014 Hearthstone when we know how much better the game can be in 2022. There's absolutely no reason the system has to have all these things in place, like a lack of duplicate protection, a lack of way to spend your excess resources. All this stuff was figured out, and it wasn't even figured out by another game. It was figured out within the game client. So it's kind of insane to me that they're being like, oh, it's unreasonable. We want these things so fast. Well, you guys set the expectation. Like, it's in your own game. Like, I don't think it's unreasonable to expect consistency across multiple modes. I mean, we've seen with Battlegrounds, they have no problem making a mode super duper accessible, but for some reason, with Mercenaries, they decide to do the exact opposite in every way, shape, and form. And that is just baffling to me because they have something really great here, and it feels like they're really squandering its potential with this issue in particular. Now, that's excess coins. There's not much more to say about that than has already been said. So we're going to move on to PvP. This is probably going to be the longest section here, as there's a lot of stuff I have to say about PvP. So, PvP is the reason why I play Mercenaries, and being done with the grinding for, the current time, it legitimately feels like a very large weight has been lifted off my shoulders by not having to endlessly farm the same boring, repetitive content over and over again, just so I can test and enjoy different things in PvP and create content about it. It's just the grind for PvE to just play PvP is so insane when the PvE really feels like it's much less developed right now in terms of like not having an end game or a satisfying progression loop. And I want more people to be able to just play PvP because that is what Hearthstone primarily is. It is a PvP game. Look at almost all the modes in the game are PvP focused. When Hearthstone originally launched, they specifically said they wanted it to be PvP focused, and that's why it launched without any kind of single player content. And most of the people who are consistently still playing Hearthstone to this day are playing it for the PvP aspects. So the fact that they decided to essentially lock PvP entirely behind this boring, half-baked PvE experience is mind-boggling to me. Because if they actually let people try PvP in some way without having to be invested in these insane hours of grinding, you'd probably have a lot more people playing the mode, and you really just can't ask someone to do all this insane grinding for the chance to try something that they may or may not like. That's just not an effective way to get people to play your game. Like, if you actually want people to play it, what they should have done is they should have reeled them in with PvP, giving them, a taste of that, make it very accessible like Battlegrounds is, and then, people want to max out their characters for that, and so they'll naturally start doing PvE as well. It's just the fact that PvP is locked behind PvE is just mind-boggling to me. I really think it was a super short-sighted decision, and I'm really hoping that it's one they can reverse in the long term. Literally anything to make it more accessible would go a long way for increasing the player base and making the experience more enjoyable for the community. Valeera is still a mistake. We've had Valeera for a long time now, and I think pretty much everyone has kind of gotten to see that Valeera is just overpowered. We've gotten some really powerful mercs, in the past few drops and stuff, but to me, Valeera is the only character who fundamentally warps the entire game around her, and I am strongly of the opinion that she does need to be nerfed. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon because, like we said earlier, the excess coin issue is kind of directly tied into this because players have expectations about getting compensation for nerfed characters, so they've been very hesitant to nerf anything. The only kind of nerfs we've gotten have been kind of bug fixes and whatnot, where they didn't have to refund anything. So Valeera is a mistake. In my opinion, the best way to nerf her while still keeping her a viable character is just cut her unnatural smoke item ability in half. Instead of speeding up everything by 2 or by 4, we do it by 2 instead. That would go a very, very long way to making Valeera just more of a fair character. She wouldn't even be bad. It would just be more fair and balanced. I really think they pulled that 4-speed number out of a hat, and it was a mistake, and they really do need to change that eventually for the long-term health of the game. And then one other character I do want to mention is Localar. I actually like a lot of things about Localar, but I think Localar is also a bit of a mistake, but he kind of exists as a mistake because of Valeera. And what I mean by that is it feels like Localar was printed at a near Valeera power level because they wanted to have a counter to Valeera or a way to deal with her, and they were afraid that, if we don't push this enough, then it won't work as a counter and Valeera will still dominate the whole metagame. And even with Localar being such a powerful addition and Valeera counter, she's still everywhere. She's still all over the meta. It's just now you see more Localar there too, and sometimes you even see them on the same team, though they usually will not be leading together as they do have a little bit of anti-synergy there. But the big thing to me about Localar is his equipment. It should not be boosting 4 frost damage every time. It also should not be boosting the whole Frost team. Frost just got an insane amount of support in a very short time, and it really pushed it over the edge. For anyone who has seen my most recent Meta Monday video, you know that I think out of the top 22 most played comps in the game right now, 16 of them are Frost-based, which is pretty nuts. So yeah, I think Localar is a big reason for that, and I don't even mind really the RNG with him and the hailstorm and stuff. 4 frost damage being added every time a character acts before him or an opponent acts before him is just way too much. If all 3 act, that's an additional 12 frost damage, and that gets applied to all your frost units. That's insane. And even if it didn't apply to other frost units, it would still be good. But the fact that it does really pushes some characters like Jaina, Varden, Belinda a bit over the edge, in my opinion. And I think, much like Valeera, they should just cut his equipment in half and be done with it. Instead of scaling up 4 frost damage, scale up 2. 4 is just way too big of a number to be proccing multiple times and impacting multiple units. And, I think it'd be a lot more balanced at 2 instead of 4. So those are my thoughts in terms of like balancing stuff. Other than those 2, I really don't have much of a problem with the characters in the meta. I actually think the recent most recent drop with the dragons and some beasts was actually very well done, and it gave us some powerful characters while at the same time kind of not pushing things so over the edge that they show up in every comp like Valeera did. I think they found kind of a sweet spot there, and I hope they are able to keep things a bit more at that level than kind of the Valeera level as we've seen before. Another thing I would really like to see is more buffs. So for anyone who wasn't around at the beginning, we actually got one big buff patch where they buffed multiple units. They buffed Illidan, they buffed Cornelius, they buffed Mutanus, a bunch of other characters. They buffed Tyrion, but all these characters were kind of not seeing as much play as, you know, they initially thought they would. So they were like, all right, we're hitting him with a buff. And some of those buffs did better than others for certain characters, like Mutanus still really didn't see much play, even though people tried him. However, for characters like Illidan and Cornelius and Tyrion, it totally changed the game, and they still, to this day, see play in quite a large number of comps. Grom is probably the most notable one from the buffs, because I think we would have a totally different Mercenaries game if we still had Launch Grom with his 4 speed slam instead of 2 speed slam. Like GVT as we know it would not have ever existed. And that's pretty crazy when you think about like the impacts that it's had on the meta over time. And Grom is kind of like Valeera, just showing up in everything. So I do think buffs are a trickier thing to do. It's, you know, I think it's easier to nerf a character than to buff a character in terms of expected power level results. But it just feels like a lot of the launch mercenaries were power crept into oblivion, and they really aren't going to ever have a place in PvP if they don't get buffed. And it doesn't even impact PvE, really, because a lot of these characters don't see a ton of play there either. Like, there's no reason I would use a Uther in my comp over, like, Anduin and Velen. There's just, I can't see a reason why I would use him. And to me, that just says that they really should buff these characters. There's already precedent for it. We've seen them do it before, and I think it would make the meta a lot more interesting and just give us some more variety in terms of the actual choices we have to make for PvP, whereas right now it feels like they are a bit more limited to certain cores like Frost. And another thing worth talking about here is kind of the pace of releases. They did mention early on that they did want Mercenaries to have monthly releases, and they have actually been pretty good about sticking to that. Haven't missed a month yet so far, which is good. And I actually think that has been a good time frame for things. Generally, the first week of a release, people are doing all their farming and stuff. Then you kind of start to see the impacts on the meta in the second week, and then it develops further over the following 2 weeks. I do have to note that 3 weeks between drops felt too fast. We did get that between not this most recent drop, but the one before it. It was only like 3 weeks instead of 4, and 3 weeks just felt kind of too fast. I knew a lot of people who weren't even close to getting the last drop done, and we're already having new ones right away. So I think 4 weeks is kind of that sweet spot that allows for time for players to kind of farm things up, try them out, see how the meta develops, see how they can kind of counter some of the new meta strategies that come out, and it just feels good. You know, I think 5 weeks is like the max that they can do, but depending on the state of the meta, sometimes that feels like it's dragging on a bit too long. I know pretty much everybody felt like the initial Valeera meta was dragging on way too long without a counter. But that was over the holidays, so that was a bit longer than we usually have to wait. But yeah, 4 weeks, definitely the sweet spot in my opinion, and I think the monthly drops are a really good way to keep the mode fun and interesting. The next thing is queue times. Queue times are abysmal when you have even a relatively high MMR, and this is kind of internal MMR. There, you know, the number you see in the game is your external MMR. However, there's a different number that is tracked internally, which is actually what kind of determines how you are match made. That is why, you know, if you see a good player or someone who placed like really high at the end of the season, maybe they don't start climbing the next month right away, and they're at like 1,000 rating or something, and they're still getting matched into a lot of these players, who are at, 10K, 12K, whatever it may be. And the reason for that is internal MMR. And the internal MMR in this game is weighted way too heavily. And it really, really screws with the matchmaking in a lot of ways. And it makes queue times really long if you have a high internal MMR. I'm at the point where most of the time, my queue times are somewhere between 3 and 5 minutes, which is kind of ridiculous. If you play any other mode in Hearthstone, except maybe Classic, can sometimes have the longer queue times, or very, very high Wild Legend sometimes as well. But outside of those two modes, there really aren't any other modes that are comparable with these queue times. Like, I know some of the other top players, like Sensor is one who, I consider him one of the best Mercenaries players around, and he is dealing with almost 10-minute queues. That is insane. And then imagine this, and this has happened to me on stream multiple times. Imagine you sit in a queue for 3 to 5 minutes, you get in the game, and the person concedes either the first turn or like 2 or 3 turns into the game. So you end up playing the game less time than you spend in a queue, which is insane, and it's a great way to drive off the good players. But this queue issue is deeper than just the queues. The queue issue stems from the fact that the matchmaking in this game and the leaderboards and internal MMR system is awful. And this is something we've given a lot of feedback about for the past few months, and they really haven't done much to improve. The kind of small bone they threw us after like 2 or 3 months of dealing with it was, we'll remove the 14K cap. That'll fix everything, right? No, it didn't fix anything. In fact, it actually made things worse in a lot of ways. And we can see that by, and I covered this in a recent video, the number one player on NA right now is a bot. Spark is a bot. They're just botting with this Frost comp, and they are almost at 30,000. They may have even passed it today, 30,000 rating, and it's just insane. And the reason for this, and we called this out as soon as the system changed for the first time back in December, the system rewards playtime over anything else. It doesn't care if you're having a 60, 70, 80% win rate, because it just your external MMR is more impacted by the amount of games you play rather than whatever your win percentage is. And that is a terrible way to do a leaderboard. The other way this kind of ties into the queue issues is higher internal MMR players have longer queue times. So basically, hypothetical situation, if I made a new alt account, like a Smurf account, I got up a team ready to go, I could farm these lower MMR players, and if I was strategic about keeping my internal MMR low by losing a certain amount of games versus them, I could easily climb all the way to the top of the ladder without actually having to play any of the top players. And the reason that works is because by doing that, you could literally play more games than a lot of the top players, even if they're putting more time in than you are, which is crazy because so much of their time is spent in queues. It's gotten so bad that when I stream Mercenaries now, I'm literally playing other games while I wait in the queue. If that doesn't tell you there's a problem, I don't know what does. We do know that, the team or people or whoever who handle the MMR stuff aren't directly related to the Mercenaries team. They're kind of their own department, but something really needs to be done about this. It's been long enough. And the crazy thing is, maybe this wouldn't have felt so bad if we didn't actually have a reasonable system at the start, but we did. Anyone who played back in Season 1 remembers it was incredibly hard to climb your way to the top, and it was arguably too hard to get that 12K reward chest, as even the best and most dedicated players were not getting it most of the time. So that was kind of the spirit of their change, was to make it a little bit easier for players to accomplish that, but it didn't work out. It messed up more things than positives it brought to the game. And it really just has made the entirety of ladder kind of a joke, which is sad and frustrating because, as someone who really enjoys the Mercenaries PvP, I'd like, the the leaderboards and stuff to actually have at least a little bit of meaning to them. You know, it's not like we're having any big external thing tied to it, like master tours or anything like that. But even just it showing, hey, these are the best players who did the best in a current month. I think that's important to actually having a dedicated and competitive PvP community. And just in its current form, the game is not that because of how easily it is exploited. And these are not new developments. These are things we've literally been talking about and communicating about for months, and just nothing has been done about it. So, in my opinion, a full ladder rework and rework of the internal system is what's needed. I really don't think there is a band-aid fix they can do for this that will be satisfactory. However, I mean, given how long we've seen the extra coins change take and some other very basic quality of life changes take, like, you know, locking an item on a mercenary to a specific team rather than having it be the same across all teams with that character. Again, that's a feature they mentioned at launch they wanted to implement, and we've heard nothing about it for half a year. Don't know why. But the very least they could do is they had a working system in Season 1. All they would have to do is effectively revert to that system once you pass a certain rank threshold. So make it 10K or make it 12K, whatever the arbitrary bar you want it to be, make it once you hit that level, you need to win more of your games to actually climb up in rating. And it can kind of be like Legend, right? Like Legend and Constructed, you know, you can get bonus stars to help you get there. But once you actually get there, you're not going to be number 1 or top 10 or top 50 Legend with a 50% or sub 50% win rate. It's just not ever going to happen. And the fact that it can happen in Mercenaries is really, really bad for the health of the game in terms of PvP. And really all they would need to do is just implement the system they had once you pass that threshold. The technology is there. The resources are there. They just need to do it. Because it's already made a fair amount of really good players and some other content creators quit the game early on. And if this is not something that gets fixed, I don't see how that's not going to happen to more people, which is really a shame. Alternatively, they could just implement some kind of legend system. It really doesn't matter to me whether it's a legend system or the MMR numbers. I really don't care. Just please. They really, really need to find a way to make it so you actually have a leaderboard that is at least a little bit meaningful, because that is what drives a lot of these more competitive players. And those are a lot of the people who are coming up with these really cool brews and interesting, you know, comps that, you know, eventually get trickled down into the larger, more casual side of the community. When you're losing those types of players, it's just a net negative for everyone over time, because you don't see as many cool decks or as innovative things. And that's something I really want to avoid. You know, we should really be finding ways to expand this game and community and not shrink it, because it's already not the largest. So I just think that is one of the biggest issues in Mercenaries behind the excess coin stuff and a little bit of balance stuff. It's just really bad. It's a very punishing experience, and frankly, if I didn't enjoy the community so much and the content creation and messing around in PvP, I probably would have just stopped playing by now because of these issues. Because why should I play a game where I have to wait 3 to 5 minutes just to play one game when I could pick up a controller and play a AAA game and boom, right from the start, I'm always doing, you know, fun, interesting stuff. The game is keeping me engaged. I'm not sitting around waiting half of the time. Like, and this makes it especially difficult when it comes to recording and such for creating content, because effectively for every 3 or 4 games I play, I spend a whole game's worth of time in the queue. That's really bad. That is just really bad, and it's a easy way to make sure that more people aren't going to create content for this game, because it takes such a crazy amount of time. And I would imagine a lot of the people who might be interested in creating content for the game are going to people who are dedicated, high-ranked PvP players, because that seems to be, from what my understanding, what most people want to see is the PvP stuff, because PvP or PvE is just not that developed and engaging right now. And like I said in the beginning, it just doesn't feel very satisfying. So I'm going to kind of wrap it up there. Those are kind of my overall thoughts and everything. You know, the game has a lot of issues. Frankly, it feels like we're kind of in early beta or maybe even alpha. I really don't think they should have kind of launched it when they did, the way they did, because I think they drummed up a lot of hype, and then they scared so many people off, so many main Hearthstone players off within that first week. And if the first week didn't do it, then the air elemental nerf right afterwards is what did it for a lot of others. So those are my feelings about the systems, the game, all that stuff. Just wanted to get this out there before, we got more new stuff again, and then I can't say, oh, I have the max collection here, but these are really the issues that I think they need to prioritize the most. They really have something great here with Mercenaries if they can realize its full potential, but the speed at which that is happening just really doesn't seem to be going at a pace that is satisfactory to me or to a lot of other members in the community. And I really hope that is something that can change in 2022 and with this new Hearthstone year, because we've already seen they've had a great change in kind of design philosophy. Like if you look at the most recent Merc drops, like the last drop or two, compared to like the first drop with Pirates, in my opinion, it's night and day. That they're clearly designing these characters more dynamically and a lot more with PvP in mind. So if they can make changes like that to other aspects of the game, I think it can have a long and prosperous future ahead of it, but they can't just keep slow rolling these changes for 6 months at a time. Like if we don't have an extra coins fix by the 1-year anniversary of Mercenaries in, October, like, that's just going to be insane. And frankly, at this point, it wouldn't surprise me if that is what happened. Like, I'm not going to believe the excess coin fix is actually coming until it's in the game, because they've really given me no reason to have faith in that kind of stuff, because we've been waiting and we've been patient, and that patience has literally led to nothing in half a year, which is crazy. That's going to do it for this video. Hopefully, this gave some useful and interesting insight into some perspectives as someone who has played a ton of the game and as someone who is actively creating regular content for it. I want to thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, do remember to like and subscribe, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace.